On a long, desolate road, a traveler has car trouble and ends up stopping in the middle of the road. Worse yet, his cell phone is dead, so he cannot call for help. At that moment, the traveler sees a house nearby. The place looks worn down, with all its windows boarded up. Looking in the mailbox, he sees the name Pritchard. He enters the property and tries to ask for help, but no one responds. At that moment, he hears a man screaming in anger inside the house. The traveler follows the noise and sees a man named Jackson through the basement window. Thinking that Jackson is torturing someone else, he retreats in fear. Unfortunately, his foot gets caught in a bear trap, and he screams in pain, alerting Jackson and the dog. As he removes the trap, the traveler hobbles away to escape, but he ends up caught in another trap, which kills him. Jackson comes out of the house and finds the dead body of the traveler. Elsewhere in town, a police officer named Conrad Colt Salter is playing a crossword puzzle in his patrol car. A plane arrives shortly thereafter, and he meets with a special FBI agent named Daria Francis. Colt enthusiastically welcomes Daria, and they head for the police station. After some time, the local sheriff, Grunwald, meets with her. They arrive at the sheriff's office, where he hands her some files. Daria is investigating the disappearance of a local woman named Maria Pritchard and her young son, Jonah. Grunwald expresses his feelings that this case is a waste of time for Daria and the FBI. According to Grunwald, he and Colt went to Maria's house 3 days ago, and the only thing they noticed is that Maria's car is missing. Reading the files, Daria notices something strange about the husband, who is Jackson, the same man who appeared earlier. As a husband, he did not file a report, but Maria's sister, named Teresa, did. Maria and her son were supposed to go to Teresa's, but that did not happen because they are missing. Grunwald thinks Maria simply went back to reality and finally left Jackson. As it turns out, Colt and Jackson studied together, so he knows the man. The sheriff says that Jackson has a bad temper, but he is not a killer. Daria then argues that if Maria and her son simply left Jackson, she must have told Teresa about it. She also adds that 45% of women who are murdered are killed by their husbands or intimate partners, so she must investigate all leads she finds in this case. At this moment, Grunwald begins to get frustrated because Daria is showing doubts about his investigation of the case. He believes that, as the local sheriff, he knows his community better than she does. Then, Grunwald brings up the Breland case and tells Daria that she did not do well in that case. When Colt enters the office, the sheriff orders him to take Daria to find Teresa and check in at the town inn. Meanwhile, at the Pritchard residence, the prisoner in the basement makes loud noises, and Jackson angrily tells him to shut up. He also threatens to kill him if he does not stay silent. Returning to Daria and Colt, the two seem to be getting along well compared to Daria's initial interaction with Grunwald. Colt remembers what Daria and the sheriff were talking about and asks about the Breland case. According to Daria, about a year ago, a young woman named Tanya Breland disappeared. It was the first case that Daria led, and 4 months after the case was assigned to her, Daria found Tanya in a shelter run by an Islamist group. But the young woman did not want to return home. They ran some tests on Tanya and everything was normal, so Daria took her home. But one day, Tanya showed up in her office and blamed Daria for ruining her life. The woman then took her own life in front of her. Hearing this, Colt asks if this is the reason she was assigned to the Pritchard case, but Daria reveals that she decided to take on this case on her own. After a while, they finally arrive at Teresa's house. Daria begins to question Teresa about her sister. According to the conversation, she discovers that Maria and Jonah used to go to Teresa's house whenever the situation at their home became difficult and stressful. Daria then asks if Jackson causes this stress, to which Teresa replies that yes. She added that Jackson and her sister never got along. Teresa also reveals that her sister's husband had been in prison more than once. Upon hearing this, Daria looks at Colt in disbelief. Colt tells her that Jackson was arrested for his drunk and disorderly behavior, as well as simple assault. Teresa continues to reveal that Jackson is getting worse, especially his temper. However, Maria cannot leave Jackson because of the child. It turns out that Maria and Jackson married very young, and Maria suffered many miscarriages, and when she finally had Jonah, she considered him a miracle. Remembering what Grunwald had told her earlier, Daria asks if Maria would ever leave town without saying goodbye or telling Teresa where they were going. Teresa says that Maria would never do that. After that, Teresa takes Daria and Colt to her room, where Maria and Jonah slept whenever they stopped by. Examining Jonah's makeshift room in the closet, Daria finds a notebook filled with children's drawings. One of them shows Jackson hitting him and his mother, while other drawings depict Jackson as the devil. Then, suddenly, the sister's mother appears emotionally, telling Daria that Jackson is a monster. Teresa quickly comforts her mother and assures her that the authorities will find Maria and Jonah. Then, Daria and Colt leave and return to the car. Daria wants to continue investigating Jackson after everything she has discovered about him, but Colt points out that Sheriff Grunwald will not like it if they pursue Jackson. He also says that, although Jackson is difficult and rigid, he is a good man deep in his heart. It is then that Daria shows Colt Jonah's notebook that she discreetly took from the child's makeshift room. Seeing the drawings, the officer is convinced to go after Jackson for a deeper investigation. On the way, Colt tries to inform Grunwald about what they are going to do, but Daria stops him, pointing out that the sheriff would only stop them. She then assures her partner that she will take full responsibility for going against Grunwald's orders. Upon arriving at the location, they find the traveler's car still parked outside. Daria inspects it and wonders why someone would leave their car unlocked with all their belongings, including the car key inside. As Daria and Colt approach the house, the dog barks and wakes Jackson up. Looking around, Colt is perplexed because the place looks very different from what it did 3 days ago. He asks Daria to stay put for a moment while he tries to find Jackson. The gate is locked, so Colt goes around while Daria stays by the car with a radio to keep in touch with him. Seeing a barn, Daria goes to check and finds Maria's car. Suddenly, Jackson appears and points his gun at Daria. She calmly introduces herself and tells Jackson her purpose in his home. Jackson takes her outside, where Colt is already waiting with his hands up. He tries to convince Jackson to lower his weapon, but the man wants them to leave his property. At that moment, Colt distracts Jackson by telling him a story, allowing Daria to surprise him and disarm him. She then orders Colt to put Jackson on his knees and cuff him. Jackson is questioned about the whereabouts of Maria and Jonah, but he insists that they are not in the house. It was precisely at that moment they heard a sharp noise coming from the house. Daria immediately goes to check. Jackson tries to stop her, but fails. He pleads with Colt to stop Daria, as something worse may happen. When she enters the gate, Daria sees some traps scattered around. She carefully enters the house, avoiding all the traps she sees. Then, she checks the upstairs rooms but sees nothing. Going back downstairs, she finally finds the surrounded door and other weapons that belong to Jackson. Upon seeing this, Daria removes all the locks and descends to the basement. She reports this to Colt, but their transmission starts to weaken. At this moment, Jackson is secretly removing the handcuffs from his wrists. Back in the basement, Daria sees that the dog is not barking at her but rather at someone on the other side of the room. Suddenly, the basement door slams shut aggressively, as if someone had slammed it. Hearing from outside, Jackson says that Colt needs to tell Daria to get out of the house immediately, but this does not scare Daria. She lights a lamp and looks inside the cage. There, Daria sees a strange, viscous, and sticky thing with a light glowing inside. She touches it with a stick, and something wraps around the stick and breaks it. It is then that Daria finally sees the humanoid creature with a large head inside the cage. Outside, Jackson finally manages to free himself from the handcuffs and tries to run back to the house, but Colt manages to restrain him again. At that moment, Daria exits the house and goes straight to Jackson, questioning him about the creature in the cage. She thinks Jackson is conducting some kind of experiment with livestock. Jackson denies it and says that what she saw is a demon. Jackson then tells them that one of the demons took his wife and son, which is why he trapped it to get them back. Of course, Daria does not believe him. Colt, who is lost about what they are talking about, asks for an explanation. Daria tells him that Jackson is keeping a deformed wild animal in his basement. She also asks what that gelatinous thing is that she found down there, to which Jackson replies that it is what the demon was wearing when it captured him. After the questioning, Daria and Colt arrest Jackson. Daria takes out her phone, but it is completely dead. Colt checks his phone and it also has no signal. They decide to just call the station on the road, but the car won't start either. Colt checks the machine but cannot see any problems. At this moment, Daria remembers the car on the road from earlier. The demon seems to have interfered with all electronic devices in the vicinity. Daria goes to check Maria's car while Colt stays by their car. At that moment, bad weather forms in the sky. Seeing this, Jackson panics and tells Colt to release him. When Daria comes back with the bad news that Maria's car also won't start, she also sees the clouds above. When the lightning starts to hit, Daria pulls Jackson from the car, and Colt goes inside the house first. Unfortunately, Colt triggers a trap, causing an arrow to hit his leg. Fortunately, he does not injure himself severely, and soon all of them enter the house. While treating Colt's leg, Daria suggests that she go out to call for help, but Jackson points out that the nearest farm is 13 miles away. Daria does not want to stay in the house, but Jackson insists that the demon will not let her out. Moreover, they are more active at night. Colt supports Jackson and says that it is dangerous outside. He believes that Grunwald will come looking for them since they have been missing for a while. However, Daria doubts that, as they did not inform Grunwald that they were going to the Pritchard's house. She then says that she saw someone when the lightning hit the field earlier. Hearing this, Jackson quickly goes to the window and says that it is Maria. Daria doubts it, but still follows Jackson outside, and to her surprise, he is actually telling the truth. They immediately bring Maria back inside the house. As soon as Maria wakes up, she looks for Jonah and blames Jackson for what happened to them. When Daria hears this, she asks Maria what really happened. According to Maria, Jackson offered Jonah to the strange beings. Just as she is about to tell how the strange creatures took her along with Jonah, Jackson interrupts her. At this moment, Jackson finally reveals everything to Daria and Colt. According to him, one time Jonah got very sick, and he didn't want to call a doctor. Instead, they went to the field, and he forced Maria to pray to God while he laid Jonah a few meters away from them. Then, a bright light illuminated the place and lightning struck where Jonah was. When Maria tried to see what had happened, Jackson ordered her not to look, but she didn't listen. She saw the being and was taken along with Jonah. When Jackson saw Maria being taken, he grabbed one of the demons and attacked it, then dragged it and trapped it in the basement. After the story, Daria asks if this is the first time he saw those demons. Jackson says no, and reveals that he was also taken once. He says that he once found himself surrounded by beings, as if they were studying him, but their conversation is interrupted when the creature in the basement screams. They all go down to see, and Jackson thinks it is calling the other beings, and he is proving to be right, as they hear his dog struggling against something upstairs. Jackson says they need to energize the generator. As it turns out, he electrified the house as protection against the beings. He and Colt go to the generator while Daria stays with Maria. When the two men leave, a demon arrives in the basement. Daria manages to shoot it, but when the lights come back, it has disappeared. When the four of them regroup, they go out to look for Jackson's dog and retrieve Colt's gun from the car, but to their horror, the beings have already brutally eliminated Jackson's dog. Furious, Jackson cuts off one of the digits of the being he captured and plans to show it to the other beings. Then he goes outside, followed by Daria and Colt, and begins to dig in the same spot where they found Maria. When he unearths a metal disc with an embedded symbol, he places the finger of the being there. Looking at the symbol, Daria remembers that she has seen this symbol before. Then, lightning strikes that area and the finger disappears. After this, they realize that it is the front door to the sky. Knowing this, the three return to the house. Inside, Daria shows Jackson Jonah's notebook, where he has drawn the same symbol. She says that Jonah must know about the beings, and that is why they are interested in him. Jackson thinks it is just a coincidence. Looking around, Daria sees a picture of young Jackson with his father. In the photo, it shows in the background that the disc had not yet been placed on the ground. It is when Jackson remembers what his father used to tell him. He says that his great-great-grandfather was taken to this place by God, and that, no matter what happens, they should never take it from the earth, because one day they will reap God's harvest there. Daria points out that the only way to clarify all of this is to talk to the creature in the basement. When Jackson grabs his foot to drag it outside, she suddenly rises and grabs him. Memories then come flooding back into Jackson's mind. It turns out that the real Jackson was killed by the beings before and was replicated. The Jackson now is a replication of the creatures. At that moment, Maria shows Daria and Colt the bodies of her children, which look exactly like the beings. It turns out that Maria never had a miscarriage. It is the false Jackson who killed her children in creature form and called them abominations. Worse, he made Maria feel that it was her fault. Hearing everything from Maria and Jackson, Daria realizes that these creatures are trying to replace them. In fact, the world of these beings is dying, and they can no longer fix it. They are replacing people so they can learn to adapt to life on Earth, and Jonah is very important to them because he is the first naturally born modified human. Colt is furious to hear all of this and tries to attack Jackson. Daria stops him and orders him to protect the house. At that moment, he sees the beings starting to gather outside. To make matters worse, the generator overloads and the house loses power. In the basement, Daria plans to continue negotiating with the creatures for Jonah and their lives in exchange for the captured being. She and Maria convince Jackson to help by appealing to what is left of the real Jackson in him. Jackson finally agrees to help, but suddenly he knocks Daria out, planning to do things his way. Upstairs, as a creature enters the house, Colt tries to fight it, but it brutally tears apart Colt's body, killing him. When the being reaches the basement, Jackson merely walks past it while carrying the sick creature. After some time, Daria regains consciousness. Maria tells her that Jackson took the being and all the bodies of her babies. At that moment, Daria promises Maria that she will get Jonah back. She then goes upstairs and finds Colt's body and apologizes to him. Daria closes the eyes of the deceased and takes his gun. Meanwhile, Jackson manages to retrieve Jonah from the beings, but it is revealed that Jackson plans to take his life to thwart the plans of the beings. At the last moment, Daria arrives and points her gun at Jackson, ordering him to stop. Jonah also pleads with his father, but Jackson says it is for his own good. When Jackson is about to kill him, a hole suddenly explodes in his head. However, it is not Daria who shot him, but Maria, who wants to save her son. But she is not finished yet and points the gun at Daria, as she will not let anyone take her child from her. She thinks that when all of this is over, the government will take Jonah and study him. At that moment, a being screams loudly as lightning continues to strike the disc. When the disc overloads, it explodes, and the impact knocks down Daria, Maria, and Jonah. Daria immediately gets up and grabs the gun. She then sees Maria comforting Jonah. When the sun rises, Sheriff Grunwell and other police officers arrive. Maria tells the authorities that everything that happened is Jackson's fault. According to her version of the story, Jackson held her and her son captive and then killed Colt when they tried to save them. Then, she killed Jackson when he was about to murder Jonah, and finally, the huge crater in the field was caused by an improvised explosive device left there. Hearing all of this, Daria denies it to Grunwell and tells him about the beings, but the sheriff does not want to listen and accepts Maria's version. Daria tries to argue, but Grunwell already declares that the case is closed. Later, she leaves in a patrol car, pulling away from the Pritchard house and wondering to herself if anyone will believe her story. The film ends with Jonah telling his mother that there are more discs hidden under the barn and stating that it is time to harvest.